There comes a moment in every human life when the walls we built to protect ourselves become the very prisons that keep us from the love we crave. And for the avoidant personality, those walls are not small. They are massive. They were built brick by brick through disappointment, betrayal, abandonment, and moments where vulnerability felt dangerous. An avoidant does not run because they do not care. They run because caring feels terrifying. They learned somewhere along the journey of life that attachment can equal pain, so their strategy became distance, their strategy became independence, their strategy became emotional armor. But here's the truth about the human heart. No matter how strong the armor is, the heart underneath still longs to be seen, to be understood, to be loved without conditions. The avoidant lives in a constant internal conflict. One part of them is whispering, "Stay safe, stay distant, don't let anyone in." But another voice deep inside is saying, "What if love is worth the risk?" And most of the time, fear wins. They pull away, they shut down, they disappear emotionally, not because you didn't matter, but because you mattered too much. But life has a fascinating way of bringing people to a moment of truth, a moment where the old patterns stop working, a moment where running no longer feels like freedom, it feels like loss. And that is the moment everything changes. Because when an avoidant finally realizes that the very thing they feared, intimacy, is also the thing that could heal them, something begins to crack inside their emotional armor. At first, it's small. A thought, a realization, a quiet awareness that pushing you away did not bring peace. It brought emptiness. And suddenly the strategy of avoidance begins to collapse. That's the moment the breakthrough begins. Because transformation always begins with awareness. The moment someone sees their own pattern clearly, they gain the power to change it. And when an avoidant reaches that point, they face their deepest fear, vulnerability. Understand this. For them, opening up emotionally can feel like standing on the edge of a cliff. Every instinct says, run. Every memory says, protect yourself. But something stronger begins to rise within them. Courage, not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else matters more than fear. They realize that love is not something you control. Love is something you participate in. Love requires presence. Love requires honesty. Love requires the willingness to be seen without the armor. And in that moment, they make a choice they have avoided their entire life. Instead of running, they turn around. Instead of shutting down, they speak. Instead of disappearing, they show up. And when an avoidant chooses to fight for you, understand the magnitude of that moment. Because they are not just fighting for the relationship. They are fighting their past. They are fighting years of emotional conditioning. They are fighting the belief that vulnerability equals pain. And when someone faces their deepest fear for the sake of love, that is one of the most powerful transformations a human being can experience. But here is the deeper truth. Love does not transform people through pressure. Love transforms people through presence, through patience, through emotional safety. When someone feels truly seen and accepted, their nervous system begins to relax. Their defenses begin to lower. Their heart begins to open. And slowly, the person who once feared closeness begins to crave it. The one who once ran away begins to stand still. The one who once avoided love begins to protect it. Because love, when it is real, awakens something sacred inside the human spirit. It reminds us that we were never meant to do life alone. It reminds us that connection is not weakness, it is strength. So when an avoidant finally breaks and fights for you, what you are witnessing is not weakness. It is awakening. It is the moment the heart becomes stronger than fear. It is the moment the soul decides that love is worth the risk. And when two people meet in that space where courage replaces fear and authenticity replaces defense, something extraordinary is created. A relationship built not on perfection, but on growth, not on control, but on trust, not on fear, but on truth. And that kind of love has the power to change everything. For someone with an avoidant personality, the greatest conflict does not happen in the relationship itself. It happens deep within their own mind and heart. On the surface, they may appear calm, independent, and emotionally distant. They often give the impression that they do not need anyone, that they are perfectly comfortable being on their own. But beneath that strong exterior lies a powerful contradiction, a deep desire for love battling an equally strong fear of vulnerability. Every human being is wired for connection. It is part of our nature to want companionship, emotional safety, and someone who understands us. Avoidant individuals are no different. They also crave intimacy, affection, and a sense of belonging. The difference is that somewhere along their journey, love became associated with pain. Past experiences, whether it was rejection, emotional neglect, betrayal, or inconsistent affection, taught them a lesson their mind never forgot. Getting too close can hurt. Because of this, their mind develops a powerful protective strategy. Instead of openly expressing emotions and building deep emotional bonds, they learn to rely on distance. Independence becomes their shield. Self-sufficiency becomes their identity. They convince themselves that needing others is a weakness, that relying on someone will only lead to disappointment. This belief system becomes deeply rooted, shaping the way they approach every relationship. But the heart does not easily accept this strategy. While the mind pushes for distance, the heart continues to long for closeness. This creates a constant inner struggle. One part of them wants connection, to share moments, to feel understood, to experience the warmth of emotional intimacy. Yet another part quickly becomes alarmed when things start to feel too close, too serious, or too emotionally intense. When a relationship begins to deepen, the avoidant often experiences emotional discomfort that is difficult even for them to explain. It may feel like pressure, loss of freedom, or a sense that their independence is being threatened. Their instinct is not to confront these feelings, but to escape them. They may withdraw emotionally, become distant, or suddenly create space in the relationship. To the other person, this behavior can be confusing and painful. It may look like disinterest or lack of care, but in reality, the avoidant is experiencing a powerful internal conflict. They care, sometimes deeply, but the fear of emotional exposure activates their defense mechanisms. Their mind tells them that stepping back is the safest option. At the same time, when they create that distance, another feeling begins to appear: loneliness. Even though distance protects them from vulnerability, it also prevents them from experiencing the closeness they secretly desire. This is the emotional tug-of-war they live with, wanting love but fearing the cost of opening their heart. This inner battle often repeats itself over and over. They move closer when their desire for connection grows strong, then pull away when vulnerability begins to feel overwhelming. It becomes a cycle of approach and retreat, connection and distance, hope and fear. The struggle is not about whether they want love. The struggle is about whether they believe it is safe enough to allow themselves to experience it fully. For many avoidant individuals, emotional walls are not something they consciously decide to build. These walls develop slowly over time, shaped by experiences that taught them one powerful lesson: vulnerability can lead to pain. At some point in their life, whether during childhood or in past relationships, they encountered moments where opening their heart did not feel safe. Maybe their emotions were dismissed, maybe they were betrayed by someone they trusted, or maybe they learned that depending on others often led to disappointment. Over time, the mind adapts to protect itself. The human brain is designed to avoid pain. When emotional wounds occur, the mind searches for strategies to ensure that the same pain does not happen again. For avoidant individuals, the solution becomes distance. If you never let people get too close, they cannot hurt you deeply. If you remain independent and emotionally self-contained, you reduce the risk of rejection or betrayal. This protective mindset slowly turns into a habit, and that habit eventually becomes a personality pattern. The walls they build are not always visible to others. They often appear confident, calm, and capable of handling life on their own. They may even take pride in their independence. Being self-reliant feels safe because it means they do not have to depend on anyone else's emotional consistency. From the outside, it can look like strength and stability, but inside, these walls also create distance from the very connections they quietly long for. One of the most common ways these emotional barriers appear is through control over personal space and emotional expression. Avoidant individuals tend to keep their deepest thoughts and feelings private. They may share surface-level conversations, laugh, and spend time with others, but when the conversation starts moving toward deeper emotional territory, they instinctively pull back. It is not that they do not feel deeply, it is that expressing those feelings feels dangerous. Another layer of their emotional wall is the tendency to downplay their own needs. Instead of asking for reassurance, comfort, or support, they convince themselves that they do not need those things. Admitting emotional needs would require vulnerability, and vulnerability threatens the protective structure they have built. So they train themselves to rely only on themselves, even in moments when they might actually need connection the most. These walls also influence how they respond when someone else tries to get close. When a partner shows deep affection or asks for emotional openness, it can trigger discomfort. The avoidant mind interprets closeness as potential loss of independence or possible future pain. As a result, they may create subtle distance, responding less emotionally, changing the subject, or pulling away temporarily to regain a sense of control. Ironically, the walls that were meant to protect them can also create isolation. By guarding their heart so carefully, they limit their ability to experience deep, emotional intimacy. Relationships may remain at a safe distance where true vulnerability never fully develops. The protective system works in preventing pain, but it also prevents the full experience of connection, trust, and emotional closeness that healthy relationships require. Despite how strong these emotional barriers may appear, they are not unbreakable. They were built through experience, and they can slowly soften through new experiences that prove closeness does not always lead to hurt. Trust, patience, and emotional safety can begin to challenge the old belief that created those walls in the first place. Over time, small moments of genuine understanding and acceptance can start to loosen the grip of those defenses, allowing the person behind the walls to gradually feel safer stepping forward. For a long time, running away feels like the safest solution for someone with avoidant tendencies. Distance gives them control. When emotions start to feel overwhelming, when a relationship becomes too intense, or when vulnerability begins to surface, stepping back seems like the easiest way to regain stability. By pulling away, they silence the anxiety that closeness sometimes triggers. It feels like relief, like breathing fresh air after being in a crowded room. At first, this strategy appears to work. Avoidants convince themselves that keeping space protects them from heartbreak and emotional chaos. If they never fully depend on someone, they believe they will never fully suffer. Independence becomes their comfort zone, and detachment becomes their emotional survival tool. But over time, something subtle begins to change. The very distance that once felt safe slowly begins to create another kind of discomfort, emptiness. Human connection is not just a desire, it is a fundamental emotional need. Even the most independent person still carries the natural longing to share life with someone who understands them. When that connection is repeatedly interrupted by withdrawal, something begins to feel incomplete. Avoidant individuals may not always admit it openly, but moments of quiet reflection often reveal the cost of their pattern. After stepping away from someone they cared about, there can be lingering thoughts, wondering what could have been different, remembering moments of closeness they secretly valued, or feeling a quiet sense of loss that independence cannot replace. The cycle of leaving becomes exhausting. Each time they pull away, they temporarily escape the discomfort of vulnerability, but they also lose the possibility of deeper connection. Relationships remain unfinished stories, moments that never had the chance to fully grow. Eventually, the mind begins to recognize that the strategy of running does not truly solve the problem. It simply postpones it. This realization becomes the beginning of a powerful internal shift. The avoidant person starts to notice that the fear they were trying to escape keeps following them. Whether they are in a relationship or not, the unresolved fear of vulnerability remains inside. Distance may remove the immediate pressure of intimacy, but it does not remove the deeper emotional conflict. At the same time, the absence of meaningful connection becomes more noticeable. Independence, once a symbol of strength, can start to feel lonely when it becomes the only emotional state a person knows. They may begin to see that constantly protecting themselves has also prevented them from experiencing the warmth, support, and emotional security that real intimacy can offer. Gradually, a powerful question emerges in their mind. What if avoiding pain has also been preventing happiness? This question can be unsettling because it challenges the belief system that has guided their behavior for so long. Yet it also opens the door to a new possibility that may be staying, facing emotions, and allowing vulnerability might create something more fulfilling than running ever could. This is the point where running no longer feels like freedom. Instead, it starts to feel like repeating the same story again and again. The pattern becomes visible. And once a person clearly sees their own pattern, it becomes harder to ignore the possibility that change might be necessary if they truly want something different. There comes a moment in the emotional journey of an avoidant individual when something inside them begins to shift. For most of their life, fear has been the driving force behind their decisions in relationships. Fear of losing independence, fear of being emotionally exposed, fear of being hurt or disappointed again. That fear quietly controlled their actions, guiding them to withdraw whenever closeness began to feel overwhelming. But eventually, there can be a moment when another force becomes stronger than that fear. That force is courage. Courage does not appear suddenly as a complete absence of fear. Instead, it grows slowly out of awareness and emotional realization. After experiencing the repeated cycle of distancing themselves from meaningful relationships, avoidant individuals may begin to see a pattern forming in their lives. They notice that every time something genuine begins to develop, they instinctively step away. At first, this behavior feels protective, but over time, it starts to look more like a barrier that keeps them from the very connection they secretly want. As this awareness deepens, they begin to question their old instincts. They may reflect on moments when they pushed someone away who truly cared about them. They may remember conversations, shared experiences, or emotional support that once made them feel understood. Those memories start to challenge the belief that closeness only leads to pain. Gradually, a realization forms. The fear that has been guiding their actions might not be protecting them. It might be limiting them. This realization creates an internal crossroads. On one side is the familiar path of avoidance. It is predictable and comfortable, even if it leads to loneliness or unfinished relationships. On the other side is something unfamiliar and uncertain, the path of emotional openness. That path requires honesty, vulnerability, and the willingness to face feelings they have spent years avoiding. Seeing that second path requires courage, because it means stepping outside the emotional defenses that once felt essential for survival. For an avoidant individual, even small acts of openness can feel like major risks. Saying how they truly feel, admitting they care about someone, or choosing to stay during moments of emotional intensity can challenge every protective instinct they have developed. Yet when courage begins to grow stronger than fear, their actions slowly start to change. Instead of pulling away at the first sign of vulnerability, they pause and allow themselves to remain present. Instead of shutting down emotionally, they attempt to communicate, even if their words feel uncertain or imperfect. Instead of disappearing when things become serious, they try to stay engaged and work through the discomfort. This shift can be powerful because it represents a conscious decision rather than an automatic reaction. The avoidant person is no longer acting purely out of old fears. They are making a deliberate effort to build something meaningful despite those fears. Each small step forward reinforces this new mindset. Every moment where vulnerability leads to understanding instead of rejection helps weaken the old belief that closeness is dangerous. Over time, courage begins to replace the instinct to retreat, and the possibility of fighting for a relationship becomes more real than the impulse to escape. True love has a quiet but powerful ability to influence the human heart. It does not force change through pressure or demand instant transformation. Instead, it creates an environment where growth becomes possible. For someone with avoidant tendencies, this kind of love can become the turning point that gradually reshapes how they experience relationships and emotional connection. Avoidant individuals often carry deep assumptions about closeness, their past experience, C's may have taught them that emotional intimacy leads to disappointment, rejection, or loss of independence. Because of this, they protect themselves by maintaining distance and limiting vulnerability. These protective patterns can feel permanent because they have been reinforced over many years. Yet even the strongest emotional habits can begin to soften when a person encounters genuine patience and understanding. When someone consistently shows care without trying to control or overwhelm them, it can challenge the avoidant person's expectations. Instead of feeling pressured to open up immediately, they begin to experience a sense of emotional safety. This safety is important because it allows them to slowly lower their defenses without feeling threatened. Trust does not develop instantly for them. It grows through repeated experiences where their vulnerability is met with respect rather than judgment. Patience plays a major role in this process. Avoidant individuals often need more time to process their emotions and become comfortable with closeness. When a partner responds with calm understanding rather than frustration, it sends a powerful message that the relationship is not a trap or a demand, but a space where both people can grow at their own pace. Over time, this patience helps reduce the fear that intimacy will lead to pressure or loss of personal freedom. Another important factor is consistency. When love is steady and reliable, it creates a sense of predictability that helps the avoidant mind relax. Instead of constantly expecting conflict or emotional instability, they begin to see that connection can be supportive rather than overwhelming. Each moment of consistency becomes evidence that relationships do not always repeat the painful patterns they experienced in the past. As this environment of safety and patience continues, small transformations begin to appear. The avoidant individual may start sharing thoughts they once kept private. They may become more comfortable expressing appreciation or acknowledging their feelings. These changes might seem subtle at first, but they represent a significant shift from the emotional distance they once relied on. Over time, these experiences reshape their internal beliefs about love. The idea that vulnerability automatically leads to pain slowly begins to fade. In its place grows a new understanding that emotional closeness can also bring stability, understanding, and support. This new perspective does not erase their past experiences, but it allows them to see relationships through a different lens. As this transformation continues, the avoidant individual becomes more capable of engaging fully in the relationship. Instead of protecting themselves from every emotional risk, they begin to participate in the connection more openly. The love that once felt threatening begins to feel meaningful and worth protecting, inspiring them to invest their energy into building something lasting rather than keeping their distance. Thank you for spending this time growing, reflecting, and investing in your emotional journey. Your presence here means you are choosing awareness, courage, and deeper connection. Until next time, keep growing, keep believing in love, and take care of your heart. Goodbye and stay inspired.